Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so thrilled to be able to have you with us today for a very important conversation on changes to the PPP program. As many of you know or may have heard, President Biden announced recent changes to the program that really levels the playing field for America's small businesses. I know all of us on the call today believe small business owners are the backbone of our economy. They're the heartbeat of our community. And our goal today is to get as much education out, take some question and answer so that you can best equip yourself during this tumultuous time with COVID-19. We're so thrilled today to continue to be joined by a set of amazing guests. We've been doing these webinars throughout the last week. We've had over 70,000 small business owners sign up and join us throughout the week. Today, we're proud to have special guests from the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, the National LGBT Chamber, founder and CEO Justin Nelson, as well as we're going to be joined by the Independent Restaurant Coalition. Just another opportunity to highlight the amazing vibrancy of the small business and entrepreneurship community. Before we get to those special guests and for the heart of the program, it is my pleasure to turn the conversation over to a very special guest from the White House, someone who I consider not only a colleague, but a friend, Hannah Bristol. Hannah, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Rhett, and thrilled to be back with you on this call and to be with such an incredible group of LGBT youth, young, small LGBT business owners, young business owners, representatives of community-based orgs, and so many others here on the call. My name is Hannah, and I serve in the White House Office of Public Engagement. I especially work with young people, LGBTQ folks, and progressives within the Office of Public Engagement, so I'm especially thrilled to be joining you all on this call today to talk about how President Biden is making it a priority to make sure that we can get critical relief to underserved communities, and that's why we are here today. The inequities that affect one community affect all of us, and we want you to know that we have the full commitment of the White House and the U.S. Small Business Administration to address the inequities exposed by COVID-19 and make sure that people are able to access the resources they need to get their feet under them. And before I hand it over, I wanted to touch quickly on the super exciting news from this past weekend. President Biden's historic $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, a plan that just passed in the Senate and will change the course of the pandemic to build a bridge towards economic recovery, is on its way back to the House. When all is said and done, this is what signing this bill could mean for working people and small businesses. We'll have $1,400 checks, direct payments to working people, and one piece of this that I'm especially excited about is that adult dependents and mixed status families are included in this round of stimulus checks in a way that they weren't in the last one. We have $14 billion for vaccine distribution, $15 billion in grants for the hardest hit small businesses, $25 billion in grants for small restaurants that have lost substantial revenue, and an additional $7.25 billion in funding the Paycheck Protection Program. Working people are hurting, and this is the most significant economic relief package to benefit working and middle-class families in American history. It's a powerful bill that will be a big boost to working families and small businesses across the country, and we're really thrilled to be on this side of it and to continue to work to getting this finally into law. So speaking of the Paycheck Protection Program, I'm going to hand it over to Erica Palmer, the Executive Director of the Independent Restaurant Coalition.
Thank you so much for including us today. We at the Independent Restaurant Coalition are really good at not taking our microphones off mute in a timely fashion. I appreciate you all including us today. The Restaurant Coalition was founded just 51 weeks ago to give independent restaurant and bars a voice in Washington. We had our very first meeting on March 18th as restaurateurs gathered to talk about how to move through the crisis together. The pandemic made it really clear that our industry had to organize to fight to ensure that millions of people can continue to rely on our independent restaurants and bars for their livelihood. Over 100,000 people who care about restaurants and bars have joined our movement, and we are out here fighting for the 500,000 independent restaurants who employ over 16 million people. Unfortunately, no single industry has contributed more to national unemployment during the pandemic. 1 in 4 people who lost their jobs worked in restaurants and bars. We're just so incredibly grateful for the work of the Biden White House and of the SBA. You all have heard clearly our needs and have worked so diligently to address the challenges that neighborhood restaurants and small businesses face. The modifications to the PPP program are an incredible lifeline for restaurants as they await the implementation of the restaurant grant program. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about the PPP changes from Patrick Kelly, who I believe will take the mic next, Associate Administrator of the Capital Access Program of the SBA.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for being on this webinar to learn more about PPP. As you may have gathered, my office at the SBA is in charge of the Paycheck Protection Program, and I'm excited to get a chance to tell you about how we're leveling the playing field so that the smallest of small businesses can get the relief that they need. Too many small businesses are being left out of the recovery, and the SBA and the Biden-Harris administration is making it its top priority to course correct. So first, here's where we are right now. The share of funding for this round of PPP, or phase 3 of funding going to small businesses with fewer than 10 employees, is up nearly 60%. The share of funding going to small businesses in rural areas is up nearly 30%. And the share of funding being distributed by non-FDI insured banks through community development financial institutions and minority deposit institutions is up more than 40%. This is obviously good, but we know that the work doesn't stop here because there are too many small businesses falling behind. So that's why last week, President Biden, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago now, President Biden made significant changes to the PPP to ensure small businesses that need the help the most have access to it. And so here's how we are doing that. It allows sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals to receive more financial support by revising the PPP's funding formula for these categories of applicants. So we'll definitely get into the question and answer period of the distinction between calculating previously with net income and now calculating with gross income and how that should be of greater relief. It eliminates an exclusionary restriction on PPP access for small business owners with prior non-fraud felony convictions, and this is consistent with bipartisan congressional proposals. It eliminates PPP access restrictions on small business owners who have struggled to make student debt payments by eliminating student loan debt delinquency as a disqualifier. It ensures access for non-citizen small business owners who are lawful U.S. residents by clarifying that they may use the individual taxpayer identification number, or ITIN, to apply. So with that, I'll pause there and hand it back over to Renee so we can take some questions.
Thanks so much, Patrick. First, I would like to introduce Marc Madrid. Marc, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and let people know who you are before we get into the Q&A?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm excited, energized to be here with all of you. I am the Associate Administrator for the Office of Entrepreneurial Development. Excited to be here, for one, because I'm connected at the heart to small business owners across the U.S. and Puerto Rico. But above that, I'm a member of your community. So it is important for us to be connected with you on the ground. And so I'm here to support you along with my colleagues, Patrick and Han, and this coalition, this allyship with the Institute, Public-Private Strategies Institute, the NGLCC. It's great seeing Hannah and also Erica. So we're here for you, and this is just the beginning. Thank you, Renee.
No problem. So Patrick and Marc, lots of questions coming in. People would love to know, they just started a business, right? Can they apply for PPP? I'm not going to assume, but it seems like last year, and I'm not going to say the date because there are different dates that people are saying that they started their business. But let's just talk through, what does that mean if people started a business during, at the beginning of last year, pre-COVID and post-COVID, if they're eligible for PPP loans?
Sure. So if you had a business that you started before February 15th, 2020, you are eligible for PPP relief. I realize it's now getting to the middle of March 2021, and you may have started a business after that date and are frustrated and being ineligible for PPP relief. But just to give some context of why that was decided that way, February 15th, 2020, it was presumed that we as a nation had some understanding of what was developing with respect to the pandemic. Obviously, none of us thought that we would be here probably a year later, still in the throes. But we had an idea that the economic situation would be tougher beyond February 15th. And so Congress, prior administrations, made that cutoff line because the presumption is if you were in business, fully operationalized before that date, you had no way to know that this pandemic was going to impact your business plan, impact your ability to access capital, and so forth. Beyond that date, you were starting a business fully aware that the headwinds were in place, and you chose to go forward anyway. And I realize that that may be not a great answer to some, and we can debate, but that's just some context about why that date was set in motion.
Thank you for that. Questions about eligibility regarding credit worthiness, right? See some questions about Chapter 13, Chapter 7s, delinquencies. What are the criterias and what would be barriers for people who have sort of less desirable credit? What will prevent someone from getting a PPP loan?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So, so first off, kind of something that will prevent you from getting access to PPP is if you have a personal or business bankruptcy that has not been discharged, that will prevent you from accessing this relief. So as long as that bankruptcy has been discharged, you can access it. But if it has not been discharged, then you cannot. That's one of the hard and fast rules. As to the broader question of credit, so traditionally lending products, whether it's consumer or commercial, orient around a credit score, and typically you need a high credit score to get access to loan products. That is not the case with the SBA's PPP product. So credit scores are not required. I will say that there are lenders out there who are dealing with new customers that they did not have a prior relationship with, but are trying to give them the relief for the PPP product. And one of the choices they're making as an institution, again, not required by law or by the agency, is to apply a credit score. But that is not a requirement to participate in this program. There are over 5,000 plus lenders originating PPP loans. So if you have an institution that you've banked with or are contemplating banking with for PPP, and they are credit scoring and you disagree with that, there are plenty of other lenders that you can find out there that may not be making that choice. As far as a traditional underwriting process and presenting financial information and so forth, the PPP loan is a standard uniform product that doesn't really look at tax returns and interim financial statements and things of that nature that are normally required for a bank to underwrite your loan. It is a formula that is, for the most part, 2.5 times payroll, or, for example, the changes that we announced last week, formally on Wednesday, involve calculating gross income for individuals who are self-employed individuals, independent contractors, or sole proprietors in order to arrive at the loan amount that you'd be eligible for the PPP relief. So I don't know, Mark, if you want to touch on just some of the resource partners that are out there that could assist with finding lenders or helping folks be prepared when they go to apply for a first or second draw.
Absolutely, but first I have to pull it back a little bit and say thank you for all of you for joining us. And you might be at different stages of this arena. You might have had a first draw of the PPP. You might have had both a first and a second draw. You might be hearing about the EIDL loan. So I understand and empathize with all of you that you're receiving a lot of information at one time. So I want to be a voice on your shoulder here on behalf of the SBA, my colleagues, for you to leverage these resource URLs, these websites that we have right here on the screen. So I just ask a favor of you is for you to consult each one of these right now while you're with us, add them to your favorites. And the Office of Entrepreneurial Development, where I serve as the Associate Administrator, we're the technical resources arm of this country, as we oversee all the small business development centers, the SBDCs, the women's business centers, the WBCs, and even the SCORE chapters across the country. Now, this website that you see on this slide, the sba.gov/local-assistance, if you go to that website, you'll be able to enter your zip code, and this will bring up not only the resource partners that I just described, but also the SBA district offices, which is under another great office of the SBA, the Office of Field Operations. What's all that going to do? Well, it's going to give you a cadre of resource options for you, of tools, in some cases counselors, to be able for you to navigate through this process. And with the new enhancements coming up with restaurants as well, we will be providing information to these resource networks. So all that means is, I submit for your consideration that you pull these websites right now, add them to your favorites, and whatever category that you're in, because you're not a catch-all, whether you're in the beginning process, the discovery process, and if you are in the discovery process, keep in mind that you still have until March 31st to get into this great arena. And I'll end with this quickly, is that I talked to an LGBTQ business owner yesterday, and on a Sunday, and they were happy to have, about 25% capacity. And what they shared with me is that learning the process in terms of the PPP the first time around in 2020 with their first draw was a learning curve, and they had their challenges. But this second time around on the second draw in 2021 has been so much more efficient. They have a relationship with their bank, which is a community bank, and they're also able to buy precious time. And I know that all of you are in different circumstances, but what he said, Mark, I just needed precious time and I needed some hope. And now I have that hope, even though we're 30% of the business that we were having in 2019. But nevertheless, I have hope with the second draw, the PPP, plus forgiveness. And I think Patrick will probably talk about that too. And so please lean into your resources. We've seen that if you ask for help, that it usually results in results. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick and Mark. There's a ton of questions about that exactly, and more specifically, people have received first round, but it wasn't enough, and they want to know, are they eligible for this second round? And with that, there's a lot of misconceptions about the deadlines of March 9th and March 31st, knowing that people want the second draw. Can you talk more about these deadlines and also eligibility for the second draw?
Yeah, sure. So first off, what President Biden announced a couple weeks ago on Monday was a 14-day exclusive period where businesses with 20 or fewer employees, including self-employed individuals, independent contractors, and sole proprietors, could have exclusive access to apply for first and second draws. So it put a hold on businesses with greater than 20 or more employees. And that sunsets basically midnight or 12:01 March 10th. We'll begin to take all applications, including businesses greater than 20. But if you have not received the first draw or second draw or put your application in during this exclusive period, you're not precluded from submitting an application beginning March 10th, moving forward through March 31st. I will tell you that lenders are recognizing that it takes time for them to process your application and to submit that application to SBA to obtain authorization for SBA to allow them to disperse you PPP funds. And so they're expressing to us that as we move into the middle of the month, they have to be mindful of setting the right expectations with you about when you apply. So what I would suggest, if you like what you hear here and you think it's applicable to your situation and you want to seek relief, do not wait. Most of the processes, pretty standardized across those 5,000 plus lenders, can be accessed online, so they're not time dependent during business hours, for example. So please, start your application process. March 31st is the congressionally mandated program deadline for the program to sunset. Without an act of Congress, the program does not continue beyond that date. We are working on some administrative solutions to enable lenders to process a first draw application, allow you to apply for a second draw application, and assuming that you've used those proceeds over 8 weeks, receive that second disbursement beyond the March 31st date. But that is an administrative solution that we're trying to get published and into effect. It does not exist today. So as of right now, March 31st is the final deadline for this round of PPP. But as far as I think the first part of your question, Renee, had to do with am I eligible to get second draw relief if I didn't get if I received a loan in 2020? Is that right? Did I have that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. So yes, so if you received a PPP loan in 2020, you can apply for a second draw during this phase. So lending the best and probably simplest path is to go to the same lender that facilitated your round one or first draw PPP loan and apply for your second draw. The one difference in eligibility from your first draw to your second draw is you need to demonstrate that you have a decline in sales of 25% or more, comparing one fiscal quarter in 2020 with the same fiscal quarter in 2019. You can choose any fiscal quarter, but you have to compare the 2020 fiscal quarter to the 2019 fiscal quarter. I have been asked, what if I could string together 3 months, kind of mix and match and compare that to 2019? No, that won't be eligible. It is fiscal quarter versus fiscal quarter. So you can apply for that second draw currently and receive those funds. And then again, apply for forgiveness on that second draw in the same way that you applied for forgiveness on the first draw.
Thanks for that. And to piggy off of that, there's quite a few questions that are talking about, well, since the rules have changed and, I have my application in there with a lender, it was once net, right? That was being used. Now it's gross income. What can I do to, change my application? And then how will the lender then accommodate that difference? Do I need to just let the lender make the difference? Do I have to call? What needs to be done with that new rule change?
Yeah, so one of the consistent themes with the pandemic as small business owners that I will state the obvious to is that you need to remain patient, but be persistent. So with your lender, while they are aware and began making loans with the new calculation as of Friday, you do need to request a application that was in flight under the prior net income calculation to be withdrawn. It cannot be withdrawn, obviously, if the funds have already been dispersed. So if you received a first draw or second draw under the old calculation and those funds were dispersed, unfortunately, that cannot be revised. However, if you have an application for which the lender has not dispersed the funds, you can ask to withdraw that application. The lender may give you reasonable expectation setting that withdrawing that application may cause a delay or prevent you from receiving the funds ahead of that March 31st deadline. That's not an unfair statement for a lender to just make you aware of. It doesn't mean that you cannot withdraw it and recalculate it with gross income. But you will likely hear some feedback around that where the lender is trying to set the proper expectations. By and large, if you get your application for second draw or first draw in this week, you should not have a problem getting it done before the March 31st deadline. But again, each lender is different. Their caseload is different. Once again, I would recommend there's also, the 5,000 plus lenders out there. So.
Thanks for that. There's a lot of independent contractors asking numerous questions, but one that's really out here is about 1099ers. And 1099ers really want to know, do 1099 contract workers payments qualify for PPP? And essentially, can if you're a 1099, can you get a PPP?
Yes. So one of the interesting things about PPP was that it allows for independent contractors to apply. So you are not picked up by whoever you're doing independent contract work for. So they do not include you in their payroll protection PPP loan themselves. You have to seek your relief separately. And so one of the challenges to your first draw, if you received one in 2020, was that you needed to calculate that from your Schedule C 2019 based on net income. And so in many cases that would have meant, or did in fact mean, less relief than if you were to calculate it using gross income. And so as of last Wednesday, a new rule is in effect that applies to independent contractors, self-employed individuals, and sole proprietors. It allows you now, either on a first draw or second draw application, to calculate your loan amount through the PPP loan based off of gross income from your Schedule C 2019.
And Renee, I would just underscore what we've heard in terms of being on the ground, meaning being connected to small business owners, is that the degree of your success, part of that depends on the communication that you have with your lender or your capital provider. So that has turned out to be very valuable. And I can tell you that this morning when I logged into my bank account, there was a delay in terms of a PPP messaging, as the message was like, we are preparing for the next round of enhancements, et cetera. But I have a relationship with my banker. So I called and I said, banker, are you supporting questions that come in from the office in the midst of this portal change? And they said, absolutely. So whether you built that relationship in 2020 or you're building it now, I just think it's a great call to make sure that you try to have as good as relationship in terms of responsiveness with that capital provider. And I'd just like to re-underscore this SBA.gov/lender match, where you can see the PPP providers that are out there in the space right now. As well, I would submit for your consideration that you talk to each other, because not only can you find out what's going wrong, but you can find out what's going right. And we have felt that has been a powerful component when you go into these peer-to-peer support networks. There's nothing like a small business owner talking to another small business owner. So we hope we inspire that activity as well, which includes the selection of lenders in this space.
That's very true. Connecting to others who are going through this as well. To talk about the successes is also important. So thank you for highlighting that too, Marc. I'm seeing questions like, if you need a business license to get a PPP, do you need an EIN number? What are sort of the qualifiers that make someone a quote unquote business to be eligible for a PPP?
So all of those things are typically necessary to document that you are a for-profit business, generally speaking. Nonprofits are also eligible for PPP, but those are the type of organizing documents and unique identifiers that would demonstrate that you are in business. The way that the PPP approaches that, because it can be cumbersome getting, for example, articles of incorporation, which are traditionally asked for to demonstrate that you're in business from each state's Secretary of State office, typically. That takes time. And so recognizing that this was an emergency program, these things around demonstrating that you are in business, if you can provide tax ID number, Social Security number, EIN, those things on the application form, that is part of it. And then there are attestations that are used throughout the form to kind of fill in the gaps on the other types of things that may normally be required by a bank. But generally speaking, this is not a full-blown loan product. It is a, for all intents and purposes, a grant that was in search of a national distribution channel. And so the Congress in the prior administration made a good choice, I think, which was taking advantage of the SBA lender intermediary network to deploy these quasi-loan products, in the sense that it's a loan that you can be forgiven for.
That's good to know. There's a lot of questions. Sorry, and the pauses are just me reading so many questions. So sorry. This is to let everyone know that this is live. I am reading through your questions. We are not answering any specific questions. I'm trying to make them general, so that they are able to answer for more than one person, because we cannot get through everyone's question. So just to be fair, I'm just trying to make sure that I generalize all questions. So that we can address as many people's issues as possible. So sorry for any pauses there are. How does one get a PPP or figure out like this whole process when they don't have payroll?
Yeah, so for those folks so it's a good question, because it's the Payroll Protection Program, right? So by definition, it was almost presumed that small businesses all have multiple employees and generate payroll. And, for a large mass of the 30+ million small businesses, that is true. But there's a more substantial population of that 32 million, roughly, that are sole proprietors with no employees and or self-employed individuals. And as I mentioned, now 1099 independent contractors that are eligible for PPP. And so the basic answer to what you need to help your lending intermediary calculate your loan amount is your Schedule C from your 2019. And then historically, in your first draw, if you'd gotten that in 2020, it would have been based off of net income. That was having a tough impact on the amount of relief that you were eligible for. And so President Biden-Harris administration announced a change that went into effect last Wednesday that allows the lender to use gross income calculated from the 2019 Schedule C. There are always nuances to ways somebody is organized. And if you use Google, you can typically find a wealth of information about your particular circumstance, literally putting in your statement. But also, I think Marc can probably speak to kind of, again, the resource partners that you can also tap.
Absolutely. So we've talked about several websites, but if you start off with SBA.gov, now in the past, I've been intentional about being connected on the ground. And so understand that we want to also provide directions beyond SBA.gov to particular locations to find a lender match here and the resource partners that I was describing earlier. But you also see SBA.gov/PPP. And you also see down here SBA.gov/coronavirus relief. So all that said, saying that I want to put myself in your shoes for a second. It's like, wow, there's a lot of websites here. But if you start with SBA.gov, I promise you that you'll be able to be directed to all these spaces. But the website that I'm going to mention now, that second bullet on that left side, or actually the third bullet, SBA.gov/local-assistance, is where you can go and type in your zip code, and it will bring some resource partners that are available to you in your area, meaning small business development centers, women's business centers, SCORE chapters at SCORE as mentors. And also, they will pull up your SBA, Small Business Administration district offices that also have some more tools for you. All that to say is that we hope that you ask for help, because I can only imagine some of you are probably right now at the grocery store or dealing with your independent school district or trying to figure out what you're going to do tomorrow, and you're here with us for a few short moments, which we are grateful for. But I hope that you lean into these resource partners, because as we start having more updates related to these programs, meaning even the implementation of forms, et cetera. We're going to distribute these from this office to the resource partners that I just described. And also, Renee, if I may, I don't want to assume on that other slide that you had that everybody knows what EIDL is, but that's an economic, injury disaster loan, EIDL. You might have heard that acronym. And so that is a loan product, an EIDL loan, but it could also be a grant. So all that means is more options if you qualify. If you can take that away from this conversation, that PPP is financing that could be forgivable, and the economic injury disaster loan, which applies with COVID-19, is also some more options to, in some cases with the loan, to get more working capital. And in the instance of the EIDL grant, could also be another resource option for you. I know many LGBTQ businesses that, when qualified, are able to leverage all three of those financing options or those funding options. Thank you.
No, great point, and thanks for bringing up EIDL. I've seen a few questions about that, and we're going to get into that, but definitely want to hop into forgiveness because there are a ton of forgiveness questions. And more specifically, are you guys able to discuss forgiveness overall? What is it? How do you apply for it? And how can you get barred from actually being forgiven?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So just at a high level, there's roughly north of 5.2 million outstanding PPP loans from the various rounds. And to date, a third of those, we've received applications on a third of those for forgiveness, and 99.1% of those applications have received full forgiveness. So I think the most important thing to understand is that the Congress, the prior administration, and now this administration, as well as the Treasury and the SBA, and your lending intermediaries, all want this loan, whether it's a first draw, second draw, or both, to be forgiven. The general governing principle for how you qualify for forgiveness is that you need to use the proceeds. 60% of the proceeds need to be demonstrated that they went to payroll, and 40% can be used for eligible business purposes such as utilities, rent, etc. So if you think about the baseline that you agreed to in your first draw back last spring, if you received a PPP loan in 2020, it was 2.5 times payroll, and it was presumed that you were going to use those proceeds over an 8-week period. Well, early summer last year, the agency put out a choice that you have to either seek relief over that 8-week period or seek relief over a 24-week covered period. So if you think about it, when you took the funds, you were assuming a much shorter time horizon that you had to use the funds. You have a much longer time horizon to apply more payroll periods. So as a result, the reason that a third of the outstanding 5.2 million loans that have applied for forgiveness are evidencing 99.1% of full forgiveness is because you can choose either that 8-week period or that 24-week covered period. And you have the flexibility of not only 60% going to payroll, but 40% can be covered through other expenses. The other thing that I'll say that was an improvement, and there was confusion about this throughout 2020, is that many people were concerned about the IRS requiring that your forgivable amount be counted as income. And so over the holiday, the Congress passed a law that said, no, your forgivable amount will not be taxed at the federal level for income taxes. You still may be taxed for state income tax, so it depends on what state you live in, but you will no longer have a tax liability on the federal level. What's more, there was confusion that the EIDL advance that many sought, and as Marc spoke about earlier, you had as an option for relief, would be deducted from your forgivable amount automatically by the SBA. And so Congress cured that. So your forgiveness amount will not be deducted by the EIDL advance amount, which was $10,000. So this means that, again, 99.1% of the applications that we've received to date have received full forgiveness. So for folks that have an amount, which is 80+% of those 5.2 million PPP loans are under 150,000, there is a simplified one-page form. You do not need to submit documents to your lender, and it is a very expedited process. And then there's a different process for loan amounts in excess of that, including loans in excess of $2 million, but 80+% of you will be working from a very simplified process. That again is the numbers are showing that 99.1% of the forgiveness applications are being fully forgiven. If you're not, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I would just come back to Patrick's fine words earlier of be patient and persistent. On this one, I would be persistent because I was literally, I had a pet sitter come over and talk to me about caring for my pet Champ. Because I will be moving to DC, in a couple of weeks. And we just started talking. I said, how's it going? How's your small business going? She said, well, you know what? I'm applying for the second draw. And I said, well, how's forgiveness on your first draw? She said, I haven't done it yet. And because I've been told that it's that they're not ready. I said, who is they? And she said, my bank. I said, oh, really? Okay. And I knew this particular bank, and I knew that they were doing forgiveness. And she was under this 150,000 threshold, meaning below that amount. I said, did you know there's a very much of a simplified process now? And if I shared with you what I think I know, would this help you? And she said, you know what? It would, even though it's a small loan amount, just having it forgiven, knowing that I have that off my shoulders, it's weighing me down. It's keeping me up at night. And if I'm going into the second draw, and I'll probably, and I'll do that forgiveness again, it'd just be great to knock something off the list. And so I know that many of you can relate to that. So I would just say, if you haven't been started the process for forgiveness, especially if you're the under 150 and under, please do so. That's one takeaway that you have from this session here. So thank you, Patrick, for mentioning that.
Thanks, guys. I'm seeing this question quite a bit too. There's people with multiple businesses, right? Are they eligible to apply for multiple PPP loans?
Yeah, so yes, it's a yes. You can apply for separate PPP loans for separate businesses. It will depend on how those businesses are affiliated or not, however, and whether or not when contemplating they are affiliated, whether or not your employee headcount remains under 300 or less. So it's a somewhat less clear answer than I've been trying to give on other issues because it is more case by case specific. But there are, for example, multiple different venues for restaurants, for example, that are applying in different states for this. So they're all under the same brand, but they're applying separately. So it depends on your case by case basis. And the good news is that these particular rules have been in kind of promulgated since last spring. And so your lending intermediary will be well equipped to help you navigate that and ensure that if you are eligible for relief for all of your businesses, you can receive it. So I'll give an example. There's many independent pharmacy owners, for example, own multiple locations, and they were able to apply for a PPP loan for each of their individual pharmacy locations separately.
Thank you. Seeing a lot about retroactiveness. Is there anything that you can talk about retroactively in the rules?
Yeah, so there isn't the ability to go back and receive a loan increase for your PPP loan 1 for the circumstances for which we're talking, a good deal about today, which is the new calculation for independent contractors, self-employed individuals, and sole proprietors, which previously was a net income calculation, is now a gross income calculation. And so because those funds had already been dispersed, you can't go back and unwind that or seek a loan increase to that particular PPP loan. However, if you have not applied for a second draw in that example, you can now apply the gross income to the second draw. And so one of the examples I used over the weekend was that was made, someone had been eligible for $6,000 under the net income calculation for their first draw, but they were now eligible for $16,000 under the gross income for their second draw. And since they had not yet applied, they were, obviously navigating that to apply now.
Thank you. Can you use PPP money for expanding your business and other resources like that? So I guess like growing your business.
Mm-hmm.
I guess also too, since we're going there, what can you use the PPP funds for and what can you not use the PPP funds for?
Yeah, so the Paycheck Protection Program was stood up in the throes of the pandemic taking hold last spring to address the emergency that the closures in those days, in the early days in April, everything was closed. And so there was a recognition that there was going to be a huge impact to the small business community. And so the Paycheck Protection Program was stood up so that the use of proceeds from this PPP loan would go predominantly to enabling you to retain, keep employees on payroll, hence paycheck. And the calculation for your loan amount was 2.5 times payroll. So one of the primary and kind of chief eligible uses is payroll. That said, there are other eligible business uses. As I mentioned, rent and utilities is another, or 2 others. So those are eligible uses. This program was not designed to help you grow your business during the pandemic. So if you are able to grow your business during this pandemic, then good on you, and we're excited for you. There are other products that the SBA and banks and lending intermediaries offer that are more appropriate for those purposes. So, for example, the SBA's 2 biggest programs, or there are 3 programs. If you're seeking a loan amount below $50,000, the microloan program is a good program, and I'll let Mark in a second kind of talk a little bit about that. But in addition, the 7A program and the 504 program allow you to buy owner-occupied real estate. And then the 7A program facilitates business acquisition and working capital. Those programs are accessible through the same lending intermediary network, including microloans that have participated in PPP in earnest. They come with really favorable terms to you, the borrower. There's capped interest rates, there's longer repayment periods, no prepayment penalties to accelerate payment, no covenants. You can access those in the absence of collateral, which is traditionally not the case for a conventional loan product. So there's a lot of advantages to them, and those are available now and will continue to be. And I'll let Mark just touch on from his experience about that.
That's right, Patrick. Thank you. So you can access information about microloans also at sba.gov. And basically, I'll just give a brief profile of what those are. They do involve an intermediary, as Patrick mentioned. They're they're 50,000 and less. In fact, the average loan size there for the microloan is 13,000. And so anyhow, I believe that I might be a little interrupted here with my stream. If that's the case, you can get there at sba.gov and learn more about microloans. And sorry if there's a little delay here on my side.
No worries. Well, want to thank both Patrick and Mark so much for the Q&A. We really appreciate it. And we want to thank all of you. So many amazing questions here. And we're so sorry we couldn't get to all of them. Want to introduce Bharat. He is the Deputy Director of the National Economic Council. He has a few brief words he would like to address everyone with.
So first of all, thank you all for joining the webinar, and I apologize for dropping in so late. I was tied up in another meeting, but I just wanted to drop in and say a few things on behalf of the White House about our small business relief efforts, the PPP, and what comes next. So, you know, the small businesses are very near and dear to the president's heart and the vice president's heart. They have spent a lot of time on the campaign trail, talking to small business owners, trying to figure out what went wrong with previous rounds of relief, and making sure that now that they're in charge, we're going to be doing a better job of getting relief to the businesses that really need it. You know, since we have taken over in this round of PPP, for example, loans to rural areas are up 60%. Loans to the smallest businesses are up 40%. Loans to through community development financial institutions are up 40% compared to round one. And so, you know, we are making progress towards the president's explicit goal, which is to make sure that relief is distributed more equitably. You know, he was not satisfied with that alone, which is why about a week and a half ago, he announced a set of changes to the PPP. You know, the most sort of high-profile part of that was that there would be a 2-week period during which only businesses with fewer than 20 employees could apply and get relief. That has been in place for about 10 days now, and we've seen some really good results in terms of smaller companies being able to get through the process quickly and actually get the relief they're entitled to, and some businesses that didn't get PPP in round one actually, you know, getting in the door this time and getting PPP in round two. We understand, though, that is not the end of the story, and that a lot of small businesses are still hurting, and that we need additional help. So that's why a central part of the American Rescue Plan, which the Senate just passed over the weekend and is heading to the House now, and will hopefully be on the president's desk by the end of the week. A critical part of that is additional small business relief. There's more than $25 billion specifically for restaurants and bars, which has been by far the hardest hit segment of the economy so far, in which, you know, a lot of mom and pop restaurants are really still struggling. There is $15 billion for grants to the hardest hit companies, especially those located in low and moderate income areas. And there's $10 billion for what the president calls his Small Business Opportunity Fund. That's going to be a program where money is distributed through state and local programs with the goal of leveraging private capital to make sure that there's money for small businesses, not just to survive the crisis, but to grow coming out the other side. You know, one thing we have heard repeatedly from small business owners is, you know, they need just a little bit of working capital because they want to finance an expansion, or you know, they notice that there's a new business opportunity in their community because of some of the changes that have happened because of COVID, but they need a little bit of money to finance that. That's what the Small Business Opportunity Fund is going to be there for. And on top of all of these things, the Employee Retention Tax Credit remains a good opportunity for small businesses to defray part of their payroll costs, up to $7,000 a quarter per employee. So that's a valuable resource. So look, I really appreciate all of the work that you all are doing and the work that you do in your communities. I wanted to say on behalf of the president and the vice president, thank you for that. You know, we are eager to partner with you, and when we are hoping to learn from these webinars and from all the discussions that we have with you about how we can do an even better job going forward.
Thank you so much, Bharat. Next, we have Justin Nelson, the co-founder and president of the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce.
Hey, thanks, Renee. I understand my time here is short. We're close to the top of the hour, so I will keep this brief. I just want to say a huge thank you to Bharat and the work of the National Economic Council. to the SBA and the work that you're doing to help keep America's small businesses, 1.4 million of them LGBT owned and operated, afloat. Keep in mind, if you are on this call, you are likely eligible for this deadline of tomorrow night at midnight. That doesn't mean that you can't still apply for PPP funding. You have until the 31st of this month. But please, if you have 20 or fewer employees, make sure you get that application in. To reiterate something that Mark said, visit www.sba.gov/local-assistance. Those are the experts in your area that can answer the questions for you, and time is of the essence right now. It is incredibly important that we do this. I'm really proud and pleased to say that of America's 1.4 million LGBT-owned companies, we have a combined economic impact of $1.7 trillion on the US economy. So we are absolutely a vibrant part of this small business economic engine that makes our country and our economy run. We are doing our best at continuing to open up avenues for you to grow your revenues, grow your customer base, and we will continue to do that, working with our partnerships, now more than 300 corporations that are looking to do business with you as an LGBT-owned firm, and working with the SBA and the Biden-Harris administration to ensure that every opportunity to unlock additional financial resources for your business are available. We found in a recent survey that nearly 3/4 of LGBT-owned businesses are either somewhat or very optimistic about what the future holds, but cited additional federal government support for PPP and other financial tools as significantly important to achieving that. So to our friends at SBA and in the administration, please continue with your efforts. We are here to be your partner. We look forward to working with you, our partners at SBA, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank my friend Brett Buttle and his team at the PPS Institute for putting on today's call and all of the others leading up to these important deadlines. So thank you very much, and we look forward to continuing our work together to get our economy and our small businesses back on track. Back to you, Renee.
Thanks so much, Justin. We want to thank all of our speakers today for all of their time and all the important information that they provided. Erica Palmer from the Independent Restaurant Coalition, Justin Nelson, the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, Hannah Bristol, the White House, Bharat Ramanthi from the White House, and then also all of our amazing partners that made this event possible, the NCBA, the Massachusetts LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and to you, all the amazing small business owners that attended today. Additionally, we thank the SBA for coming together to create this amazing opportunity to have a webinar series to discuss the changes of the PPP and answer questions that many of you small business owners are having. This is being recorded and will be made public and emailed out. So if you missed any portions of this one, as well as any of the other recordings in the series webinars that we had earlier this week, or excuse me, last week, will be made public and are available for you to watch and review as well. We hope that you learned something and are able to use for your business, and look forward to seeing you in the next series of webinars. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.